Not too long ago, tourists to Australia would arrive with the most commonly held preconceived fears of personal risk and harm being attributed to attack from wildlife, which was a reasonable view given the continent is known as the home of 21 of the 25 most venomous snakes in the world, and an abundance of deadly marine species, prolific crocodiles, drop bears, and the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is more commonly known as the Tasmanian devil. However, a continuation of violent and unforeseen attacks on tourists committed by human predators has caused a shift in the mindset of travellers away from the dangers of wildlife and raised concerns about the dark and brutal tendencies of some of the local people. In today's story, we're going to be looking at how a tourist ride-sharing arrangement quickly transcended into a situation of the hunter and the prey. This is a story about the ones that got away, victims of a sadistic man who preyed on tourists after gaining their trust in the vast, empty Australian outback. On the 9th of February 2016, a Brazilian backpacker was found naked and terrified by fishermen on a remote beach named Salt Creek, which is located a short distance past the town of Coorong in South Australia. Soon later, they would find her friend from Germany, covered from head to toe in blood. This story begins when Brazilian-born Beatrice met fellow German backpacker Lena Rubente shortly after arriving in Australia. They were both young 23-year-old travellers who had come to join the thousands like them seeking fun and adventure. Before long, they realised they shared similar travel plans and decided to go together from Adelaide to Melbourne. They figured travelling together would give them a sense of reassurance, but they both considered themselves to be safe from the scary campfire stories that were occasionally told by fellow backpackers, and these stories were often based on true stories of sexual assaults and murders, and sometimes even incidents involving unresolved disappearances. Demonstrating this mindset, Lena later recalled having watched the horror movie Wolf Creek with one of her friends before setting off on her trip to Australia, and she jokingly said this would never actually happen. Beatrice and Lena posted a rideshare request through a popular local Craigslist-style website called Gumtree, trying to find someone to drive them the 730 kilometres or 450-mile journey from Adelaide to Melbourne, which was usually about an 8.5-hour drive. They had experience with this method of ride-sharing, and soon they received an offer from a man who was willing. However, their luck soon changed when he had to withdraw due to car troubles. But being a fairly well-travelled route, linking the two major cities, they were sure it wouldn't take long to find someone else. And they were right. Soon after, they were contacted by a man named Roman Heinz who had offered to take them on a trip he had already planned heading in the same direction, with the understanding there would be some camping along the way and that he would assist by providing an extra tent and some sleeping bags. The initial impression gained by the girls was that he was a little bit gruff and impatient when confirming the details of their travel, but Beatrice and Lena figured there was nothing too concerning about some apparent bad manners. 59-year-old Roman Heinz was a German immigrant who came to Australia as a child in 1959. He had lived a relatively ordinary life, having trained as a chef after high school and later working as a roofer. He was twice married, the first lasting 12 years including fathering a son and a daughter, and the second marriage of 22 years where he fathered a further 3 sons before separating in around 2012. When they met at the agreed location of Mawson Lakes railway station, Beatrice and Lena noticed Heinz was older than what they were expecting, having previously mostly met people under the age of 30 when using online travel sharing arrangements, and they would describe Roman as an older balding man with a distinctive handlebar moustache. Now, an old dude like Roman offering rides to young foreign women would probably be a red flag in most countries. However, they felt somewhat reassured in knowing that they'll be travelling together. Roman was a really big man, standing at 198 centimetres or 6'5" tall, which would create a pretty intimidating presence, but Beatrice and Lena nevertheless set off in his car and proceeded to build the impression during the early stages of the drive that he was a quiet man and somewhat of a gentle giant, who spent most of his time really just focused on the driving. During the drive, Roman mentioned the area of Salt Creek and how it was a great place for fishing and to observe some beautiful nature, and suggested it would make a good location to set up camp on the first night. It was the first time the women had any real concerns about the stranger who was driving them, but they ultimately decided it was okay. That afternoon, after they made camp, Roman went to set up his fishing rods and Beatrice changed into her bikini between the tents. She remembered thinking to herself it was a bit weird to be in the middle of nowhere with people who were not really her friends. It wasn't exactly what she had planned, but she said she felt okay-ish about it. When Roman returned, she shared some wine with him before Lena went to take a nap. Shortly after, the conversation turned to wildlife in the area, and Roman said that there were some lovely kangaroos that lived nearby and suggested they go for a walk to see if they could find them. Beatrice thought that would be really nice. After all, when you come to Australia, you come to see kangaroos. So together they walked off a short distance into the sand dunes. But unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in their search, so Beatrice said they should head back to camp, when suddenly Roman attacked from behind and pulled her to the ground. This action was completely unexpected. She knew something was happening, and this was something dangerous to her life. With the intent to instill immediate fear and compliance, Roman stabbed the knife into the sand and climbed up onto her back and pulled out a pre-cut length of rope, which he used to tie her ankles. But Beatrice managed to throw another length of rope away, but stopped struggling when Roman threatened to break her arm and punched her in the face. He then proceeded to tie her hands behind her back, and once immobilised, he used a knife to cut away her bikini bottom and attempted to gag her mouth with it, but she clenched her teeth to stop him. Despite being subjected to this terrifying and brutal attack, Beatrice remained focused on survival and escape. She would later describe the situation as, when you see a movie with a victim, when someone's running away and you think, that girl, she must do this, she must run away like this. Beatrice said this situation was exactly like being in a horror movie, and she was feeling she needed a strategy to get away. She believed if she didn't do something about it, she was going to die, and imagining the unthinkable situation of her mum coming there to see her dead body. This was not the outcome she would accept, and overcome with courage, she committed herself to action with the thought, I'm not going to die today. I came to Australia, I came to live my dream, I'm going to do something about it, I'm going to get away from here. Beatrice tried to reason with Roman, convincing him that they should return to the camp by suggesting it would be more pleasurable if they went back to the tents. Agreeing, Roman tied her ankles so that she could only hobble and began walking through the dunes towards the campsite, but partway through this, Roman appeared to change his mind. Beatrice started screaming to Lena, knowing it could be her last opportunity, and Roman got really angry, pushing her down to the sand and again punching her maybe 5 times. He then grabbed a handful of sand and said, if you do that again, you're going to eat sand. Despite the roar of the surf and wind on the beach, Beatrice's terrified screams woke Lena, who went out to investigate and found Beatrice laying naked on her back with Roman standing over her. Lena would prove to be equally courageous and shouted at him, get off her, let her go, what the hell do you think you're doing? But Roman just turned to Lena and said, I just wanted to try her. And while he was facing the other way, Beatrice noticed a long handle tucked into his belt. She thought it might have been either an axe or a hammer, and she screamed, Lena, run! He's got an axe! As Roman and Lena faced off, Beatrice attempted to pass her wrists under her bottom and legs and was able to untie her ankles. But she couldn't run in the deep soft sand as she had no balance without her hands. As this was happening, Lena reached for her phone to try and call for help, which caused Roman to leave Beatrice and chase Lena back to the car, where he caught up with her and struck her about the head 4 or 5 times with a hammer, causing deep skull lacerations. Somehow, Lena was then able to get away from him and get to Beatrice, where she was able to remove the rope that had been tied around her wrists. Beatrice assessed the situation and came to the realization that this was the exact moment when you're watching a horror movie and the guy who's going to follow the girls, and they do that stupid thing that ends up in things going very badly for them. The moment to regroup was fleeting. With Roman now in the car and coming at them, they knew their most strategic method of evasion would be to head off in separate directions for help, knowing otherwise he'd just come and get both of them. So Beatrice, totally naked from her attack, headed in the direction of the gate to the beach and was able to find a concealed place to hide in some bushes. Next minute, Roman took off after Lena and began chasing her through the sand dunes in his car in what was a true horror movie scene as he played his game, hitting off the bull bar a number of times and causing her to be repeatedly knocked to the ground, even at one point driving over the top of her. But she continued to get up again and run. But eventually, Lena was so exhausted and unable to run further in the sand, and she knew he would just keep knocking her down. So when he drove towards her again, she jumped up onto the bonnet of the car and climbed onto the roof, which had a large mesh tray, with her injuries leaving a large blood splatter all over the vehicle. After an hour or so with Lena on the roof, Roman stopped driving and got out of the car and attempted to strike at Lena's legs with a hammer to get her off. There was an angry exchange in which Roman demanded that Lena come down, but Lena pleaded for him to return her to the road. But instead, he just returned to the car and began to drive wildly and erratically through the sand dunes, with Lena hanging onto the car's roof rack. This prolonged attack only stopped when the car became bogged in the sand, and Roman hung his head out of the window and asked Lena, "Can you hand me down a shovel?" In a bizarre shift of behaviour, Lena managed to negotiate with him over the shovel, demanding that he throw away his weapons, let her back in the car, and give her something to stem her head wound. and also allow her to take her bag and drive her back to the road. Agreeing, Roman freed the vehicle from the sand and drove off with Lena now in the car. While all this was happening, Beatrice leapt from her concealed position among the bushes and ran naked towards a passing car of 4 fishermen, and this included Ali Muhammad, his son Abdul Karim, and 2 cousins who were driving along the beach. She screamed at the men hysterically, "Go, go, go! Get out of here! He's going to kill all of us! He tried to kill me! He's got my friend and he's still out there with her!" Despite her terrified behaviour, Abdul Karim described Beatrice as being kind of relieved, and at the same time it was pretty much as if she'd seen the devil. However, Beatrice's flight response quickly shifted back to fight, and she insisted that they go back and search for Lena, empathising she was still out there on this trip because she had invited her. The fishermen provided Beatrice refuge in the car where they gave her clothes and tried to understand what had happened. Soon they were joined by 2 other passing vehicles who agreed to travel with them to the main gate to look for Lena. Beatrice directed the fishermen to the beach campsite where they looked for Lena and discovered signs of what had happened. When the other vehicles got back to the gate entry point, they came across some off-duty police officers who were noted to take very little interest in the commotion. While talking to them, they saw Roman's car snaking its way past and travelling very, very fast. One of the men also saw Lena in the passenger side of the vehicle and she was screaming for help as it drove by. Immediately the fishermen got into their cars and drove along the beach trying to observe Roman's vehicle, which once again became bogged in the sand, and Lena seized this opportunity to run to their rescue. The fishermen who came to Lena's aid were so shocked to see her covered from head to toe in blood, and at first they weren't able to tell if she was male or female. With her injuries so severe, she had a tennis ball sized lump on her head that was bleeding, and her face and head were swollen. They provided some immediate assistance before driving her back to the safety of the Salt Creek Roadhouse, which had coordinated a police response that would quickly result in the arrest of Roman. Roman Heinz would go on to have his day in court, where he would also be found guilty of indecently assaulting his first victim in 2014, followed by his second 3 months later, in addition to another failed attempt. It also subsequently emerged that Heinz had previously targeted 13 others from the Gumtree website's ride-sharing listings. These crimes were considered the heinous acts against Beatrice and Lena, and he was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, sexual and physical assault, and endangering life, which resulted in a 22-year prison sentence. As Lena commented to her friend regarding the movie Wolf Creek prior to travelling to Australia, this would never actually happen. Travellers are statistically more likely, but unlikely, to be harmed by the various wildlife outlined in the beginning of this story. But unfortunately, the reason why some of those scary campfire stories are scary is because they are believable. And the reason they are believable is because many of them are based on true events, such as those experienced by Beatrice and Lena. Okay, that's what we have time for today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you got something out of this. Don't ride with strangers, and I'll catch you next time.